There is very little reliable information about the Emperor of Mankind, and significantly less when you're referring to his childhood. He is a difficult character to depict and interpret, and every single perspective of him seems to cause division among the readers. This is owed to him being enigmatic by nature, but also by the inherent complexity of his actions and implied thoughts. The excerpt we're discussing today is one I find particularly interesting, and I will talk about my own perspective of it when we're done. The excerpt is from The Master of Mankind by ADB. I will leave a link in the description in case you're interested in buying it. So, without further delay, let's begin. The boy who would be king held his father's skull in his hands. He turned it slowly, running his fingertips across the contours of skinless bone. A thumb, still browned with field dirt, traced across the blunt ivory pegs of the gap-toothed death smile. He lifted his eyes to the stone shelf where the other skulls sat in silent vigil. They stared into the hut's gloomy confines, their eyes replaced by smooth stones, their faces restored with the crude artistry of clay. It was the boy's place to remake his father's face in the same way, sculpting the familiar features with wet mud and slow swipes of a flint knife, then letting the skull bake dry in the high sun. The boy thought he might use seashells for the eyes, if he could barter with the coastal traders for two that were smooth enough. He would do this soon. Such things were tradition. First, he needed answers. He turned the skull once more, circling his thumb around the ragged hole broken into the bone. He didn't need to close his eyes and meditate to know the truth. He didn't need to pray for his father's spirit to tell him what happened. He simply touched the hole in his father's head, and at once he knew. He saw the fall of the bronze knife from behind. He saw his father fall into the mud. He saw everything that had happened leading to this moment in time. The boy who would be king rose from the floor of his family's hut and walked out into the settlement, his father's skull clutched in one hand. Mud brick huts lined both sides of the river. The wheat fields to the east were a patchwork sea of dark gold beneath the eye of the setting sun. The village was never truly quiet, even after the day's work was done. Families talked and laughed and fought. Dogs barked for attention and whined for food. The wind set the scrubland trees to singing, with the hiss of leaves and the creak of branches forming their eternal song. A ragged dog growled as the boy passed, yet fled yelping when he gave it no more than a glance. A carrion bird, hunchbacked and evil of eye, cried out above the village. A pack of other ragged children moved aside when he drew near, their ball game fading away and their eyes lowering. His barefooted walk took him unerringly to the home of his father's brother. The man, darkened and hardened by his years in the fields, was sat outside the mud brick hut, threading beads onto a string for his youngest daughter. The boy's uncle uttered the sound that meant the boy's name. In response to this greeting, the boy held up his father's skull. Many centuries after these events, citizens of even civilized and advanced cultures would often misunderstand exactly what a myocardial infarction was. The savage, constricting pain in the chest was due to blood no longer flowing cleanly through the heart's passages, causing harm to the myocardium tissue of the heart itself. Put simply, the core of a human being runs dry, trying to function with no oxygenated lubricant. This happened to the boy's uncle when he set eyes upon the skull of his murdered brother. The boy who would be king watched with neither remorse nor any particular hostility. He looked on as his uncle slid from his crouch onto the mud, clutching at his treacherous chest. He watched as his uncle's sun-darkened features pinched closed, ugly and tight in supreme agony, as the older man shook with the onset of convulsions. He saw the necklace slip from his uncle's grip, the necklace that was being made for his young cousin, and would now never be finished. Others came running. They shouted, they cried, they made the noises of language that spoke of panic and sorrow in a Proto-Indo-European tongue that would come to be known as an early precursor to the Hittite dialect. The boy simply walked away, heading back towards his family's hut. I believe I should provide some context for this excerpt. The Emperor is showing one of his custodies this memory. He implies he wishes to illuminate him on a certain topic, but is as elusive as always, as you can imagine. Though the book itself is quite divisive, I do not dislike this excerpt at all in particular. It is interesting enough, and the mere morality of the Emperor's actions could spark a debate all on its own. Although I definitely wish to discuss something like that eventually, today I want to focus on a different topic entirely. In the conversation he has with this custodian after this specific scene, he talks about the roots of humanity, but more importantly, he speaks of justice and codes of conduct. The lex talionis, or law of retaliation, is the concept which a lot of the older civilizations would incorporate into its rules. Or perhaps I should say, it is the embodiment of those rules. Laws were mainly created to keep order, to ensure the pacific coexistence of the people, and to guarantee the survival of a culture. Without the bonds of law, only chaos can survive, and a civilization can never flourish under those circumstances. The murder of his father by his uncle's hand enlightens the Emperor to this necessity, but most of all, it shows him the necessity of authority. This is an idea he would cultivate, eventually culminating into the creation of the Imperium when humanity reached a point where it could never survive without direct guidance. This is a point he also makes to his custodian. He mentions humanity's need for an overseer. What I personally think is interesting is that this does gives us some insight into his motivations. He clearly saw his Imperium is absolutely necessary, but more than that, it speaks to his perspective of humanity and its behavior. Whether he was correct or not, I can hardly say, but I do believe the Emperor really thought humanity had no other acceptable path to choose. If you have something else to add, or if you simply disagree with me, please leave a comment below. I truly wish to hear your thoughts on this matter. As always, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe if you wish to see more content like this. Thank you for watching, and until the next video,